Good morning, guys. It is Bible Scribe. I'm just going to do a Bible study with you guys this morning on John chapter 9. And the reason is, as far as the choice of chapter, I'm just, John is one of those books where, particular to a lot of the different things I teach on my channel, John is where a lot of people have questions. So I want to go through John. I started in chapter 8 in one of our first Bible studies together, but now we're in 9. I may go back in some of those chapters in the before 8, but I just wanted to keep going through John. It's interesting to me. John is a different gospel. It's different than this what they call the synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And so to me, it just is. It's an amazing book, a letter for one thing, and especially the way it starts out in John chapter 1, which I've taught on before in other videos. In the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. And, so it just is, in general, such a different book than the other Gospels. To me, that's important to study particularly. So anyway, just going through John, we're going to continue in chapter 9 this morning and just go verse by verse, reading together, talking about it. And so let's do that. And thank you again for joining me, you guys. I really appreciate you. I feel a kinship towards you when you participate in these videos. I've been telling people recently that all over the world, I have people that talk to me, that connect with me because of the scriptures. It's because we're all on this journey together. We're all looking at the same kinds of things, studying together, and I just appreciate you more than you probably know. It means a lot to me, so thank you for your participation in this channel. I just really appreciate you. All right, so John chapter 9, and again, we'll just start by reading. Let me get I have this pen tool. I'll get it ready so I can circle things or whatever as we go. All right, let's see here. Does it work? Oh, it does work, but you can't see it. Okay, well, I may not use the pen tool anyway. Let's just go ahead and start by reading in John chapter 9, verse 1. Make sure this is big enough. I want you guys to be able to see it there. Okay, there we go. John chapter 9, verse 1. And as Jesus passed by, he saw a man which was blind from his birth. And his disciples asked him, saying, Master, who did this sin, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus answered, Neither hath this man sinned, nor his parents, but that the works of God should be made manifest in him. I must work the works of him that sent me. Okay, first let's talk about that statement by Christ. How does that sit with you? How does that make you feel? Jesus saying this man was blind from birth for the simple purpose of that God's works should be shown in him at this time. So this man had experienced his whole life blind. And, a lot of us I think, in my opinion, is in our human short-sightedness. We would think, well, that's cruel that God would make a man live a life blind. Well, I mean, if you lived your life blind, would you know any different? Would you be concerned? I mean, this is how he lived his life every day. It was normal for him. And yes, there are things he couldn't do because of it. And he knew that he couldn't do certain things. But at the same time, it's our minuscule ideas of what cruelty might be and what good and bad is not really relevant to God. I mean, how amazing is it for this man when Christ comes along and heals him, and he spends the rest of his life being able to see and then tell others about Christ. Tell others about God is real. He did this for me. You may not understand, but I've been blind since I was born, and now I can see for the rest of my life. That's only by the power of God. Now that's what Jesus is talking about here. That in him, God intended from his birth to make manifest his power in his life. And I mean, it kind of also, if you start thinking hard about that, gives you a different perspective on your own life, like your own faults, foibles, things that are problems with, maybe physical things you don't like about yourself or that hinder you from doing what you think you ought to be doing? Could you perhaps say that maybe God just wants to manifest his work in your life, even though, your physical body is perhaps not what you intend for it to be or want it to be? Can he not work through that in such a way that it blows people's minds? I've seen that happen with disabled people. Sometimes because of that, disablement or that hindrance, they are able in their life to overcome it in such a way that other people are like, that's only God's power that could do that. I mean, God has done a mighty thing in that person. And that's exactly what Christ is talking about here. He says, neither this man has sinned nor his parents, but that the works of God should be manifest in him. Now, again, this to me also reminds me of the story of Job. Job spent a ton of time, and most of the book of Job is Job talking with his friends, they're trying to figure out why all of this calamity has fallen upon Job. Okay, but in the end, Job comes to the conclusion, God is God, and I'm going to serve him no matter what. I mean, Job was pretty steadfast in that the whole time, but I'm just saying, this is what the whole book of Job is about. Is it because of sin that bad things happen to good people? Or is it because of what? It's really just because usually that answer is there's evil in the world and God is powerful to overcome it. That's the answer to those questions. In verse 4, Christ continues and he says, I must work the works of him that sent me. Now, who is it that sent Christ? It is God the Father. Okay. Jesus, having been begotten of the Father before creation of the world began. And then at this time in history, in the first century, at that moment, God decided that's when I'm going to send my only begotten Son to become human and do the things that were necessary to reconcile man to God enough that I can then bring them to be with me in heaven. Okay. Otherwise, there was no restitution of the dead human soul. Okay, everyone's soul went to Hades. If Christ had not come, then no one could be rescued out of Hades and taken to heaven. That's what he did. He made a way for the human spirit to get a new body that was capable of existing in heaven, and then he took human spirits there. And will take any Christian human spirits there after death. I belabor that point, but it's important, I think, to really have a good understanding of what the afterlife is all about. What does it mean? What did Christ do when he came and died and went to Hades for 3 days and 3 nights? If you don't understand that, if you just think, most Christians don't know what happened when Jesus died. They just like, he died and then he rose 3 days later. And that paid for your sins. That's true. The sacrifice paid for your sins, not his raising again. The sacrifice of the perfect God-man, essentially, divine man, Christ, God's only begotten Son, that was what paid the penalty for your sins and made it possible for a human to go to heaven, to be with God. Otherwise, all humans are corrupt and cannot do that because of sin, okay? But most people have a very simplistic understanding of what happened, what Christ really did. And I think what happens is if you do understand that he went down, he defeated death, made it so that humans can get out of Hades and go to heaven. Then if you know that, you understand that, it kind of broadens your sense of, oh my goodness, God really had to change the order of things for us to go. He had to do so much. It was such a display of his power, right? And God, having given Christ that authority and that power to do those things, he did them, okay? Still in verse 4 there, I must work the works of him that sent me. Christ saying, I must work my Father's works while it is day. The night comes when no man can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world." And when he had spoken, he spat on the ground and made clay of the spittle and anointed the eyes of the blind man with the clay, and said to him, "Go wash in the pool of Siloam," which is by interpretation sent. Saying that word Siloam, the meaning of that word, I think probably what usually happens when this kind of thing happens in the New Testament is that Siloam was an Arabic term for the place, because that was Arabic. It was named, in the Hebrew tongue, or Aramaic, not Arabic, sorry, Aramaic. And so they give the interpretation there in the Greek as well. So the blind man went this way, therefore, and washed and came back with sight, seeing. And I believe Siloam, too, if I'm not mistaken, the pool of Siloam was that pool in Jerusalem where occasionally an angel would come and stir the waters of the pool, and then people would go into the water and come out healed. So that was a known thing that I think was on a kind of a scheduled basis, that they knew the angel would come at certain times. But this is Christ saying, go onto that pool right now and you'll be healed. And so whether there was an angel there or not doing anything doesn't matter. Christ intervened and made this happen at this moment. Okay. And so he came back seeing, and then in verse 8, the neighbors therefore, and they which before had seen him, and that he was blind, said, "Is this not he that sat and begged?" Some said, "This is he." Others said, "He is like him, but it's not him," essentially is what they were saying. "Oh, it's just someone that looks like him. It can't be him." But then the man said, "I am he." So he confirmed it. I'm the one that was there begging. Therefore said they unto him, "How are thine eyes opened?" And he answered and said, "A man that is called Jesus made clay, and anointed my eyes, and said to me, Go in the pool of Siloam and wash. And I went and washed, and I received sight. And they said unto him, Where is he? And he said, I don't know. Apparently Jesus had moved on, and the man was only able to attest that it was Jesus that did this, but that he didn't know where he had gone to. So in verse 13, they brought to the Pharisees him that aforetime was blind. So these people brought the man to the Pharisees to show them, because they were the spiritual leaders. They were like, what's going on here? They took the man to the Pharisees, and it was Sabbath day. It was actually the Sabbath. So it was the last day of the week, the seventh day, Saturday, if you will. It was the Sabbath day when Jesus made the clay and opened his eyes. Then again, the Pharisees also asked him how he received his sight. And he said to them, He put clay on my eyes, and I washed, and do see. Therefore, said some of the Pharisees, This man is not of God, because he keepeth not the Sabbath. Others said, How can a man that is a sinner do such miracles? And there was a division among them. So, half of them were like, well, we can get him on this technicality. It's the Sabbath, and he healed someone. He did work. So we're going to get him. It's so stupid. These Pharisees were so corrupt at this point. And then others said that how can he do miracles? He's a sinner. Okay, and we're going to see later what they mean by that. That's a specific thing they're talking about there, but we'll talk about it because it's mentioned later in the passage here. So there was a division among them as to how to attack, essentially, how to get Jesus. That's really what they're saying here. How can we get him? Either he's, working on the Sabbath, or he's a sinner and doing miracles, so we know that's not true, whatever. They're trying to figure out how to attack, because they don't, at this point, they're trying to do anything they can to stop the news of what Jesus is and what he can do. So they say to the blind man again in verse 17, What sayest thou of him that he opened thine eyes? And he said, He is a prophet. Okay. Which Jesus was a prophet. Okay. But he was a lot more than that. Okay. So it's not wrong to say he's a prophet. Perhaps the man didn't understand who Jesus really was, that he was the Son of God. But I don't think the man is doing him any disservice by saying this, because this is, by the way, to the Pharisees. Anyone claiming to be a prophet was also heretical and apostate to them. So just as bad a thing. I don't think the blind man who received sight is denigrating Christ in any way here. He's just saying, oh, he's a prophet. He's definitely special, you know. But the Jews did not believe concerning him that he had been blind and received his sight until they called the parents. They called in his parents to confirm, was he really blind since birth? And they asked, saying, is this your son who was born blind and now sees? And his parents answered them and said, we know that this is our son and he was born blind, but by what means he sees now, we don't know. Or who has opened his eyes, we don't know. He is of age, ask him, he will speak for himself. So I like that. The parents are like, yeah, he's our son. Why don't you ask him yourself? I mean, he's a grown-up. Why are you bugging us? That's kind of funny. These Pharisees were like little children just trying to argue and foment problems. Just stupid. Verse 22, these words spake his parents because they feared the Jews, for the Jews had agreed already that if any man confessed that he was Christ, he should be put out of the synagogue. Therefore said his parents, he is of age, ask him. So this passage saying that the reason they said that, snide little comment, go ask him yourself, is because they feared the Jews. Now, is this man not a Jew? It may be that he is not a Jew. It just says they saw a man that was blind from birth, so we don't know. And now I'm interested, so I'm going to go to chapter 8 again and see where they are at this point. In the first verse of chapter 8, they're at the Mount of Olives, and then they go to the temple, okay? Let's see if the location changes before chapter 9. These words spake Jesus in the treasury as he taught in the temple. So he's in the temple still. I think he runs. Don't I remember that? He leaves and sneaks out because they hate him because of what he says here. He says they're children of the devil. Yes, yes. They hate him. They hate him. Okay. Because Jesus said, before Abraham was, I existed. Then they took up stones to cast at him, but Jesus hid himself, went out of the temple, going through the midst of them, and passed by. So maybe he's just out of the temple, but still in Jerusalem. That seems to be the location, unless, we're just missing something from the scripture itself. Like it doesn't tell you, but there's a location change. So he's in Jerusalem, and I don't know whether when it says the parents of this blind man feared the Jews, I don't know if it means Jews in general, meaning they're not Jews and they are afraid of Jews because the Jews are mean, and they are, and they're ugly in this time period. But it may just mean the Jewish leaders, okay? It may mean they may be Jews as well, including the man that was blind, but they're fearing the Jewish leaders, like these Pharisees. So I don't know. It's hard to know which it is. But regardless, the parents were afraid of these guys for sure, because they knew that if any man, like it says, if any man confessed that he was the Messiah, Christ, the anointed one, then he should be put out of the synagogue. So they didn't want that to happen. Perhaps they knew of Jesus. Perhaps they had listened to his teaching and appreciated it, and essentially were following after Christ in some way, and they didn't want that to happen. They didn't want him to be thrown out of the synagogue. So, if any man confessed that he was Jesus, okay. Oh, you know what I think this is saying? This is even better. If any man confessed that he, meaning I bet they're talking about Christ. If any man said that Jesus was the Messiah, they would be put out of the synagogue. This is why the parents are worried for their son, who now received his sight, because if he had said and claimed that Jesus was the Christ, the Messiah that was foretold to the Jews, then the Pharisees and scribes were throwing people like that said that out of the temple. They were barring them from entering the temple and doing offerings or whatever. So I think that's what the parents seem to be afraid of in this case. They didn't want themselves or their son to be barred from temple rites. temple exercises, temple practices. Because that's what it seems to be saying here, that if a man went around saying, oh, Jesus is this Messiah, he's the Messiah, no, you'll get thrown out of the synagogue by these Pharisees. So that seems to be what they're worried about. So they just tell him, go ask the man. So they again call the man that was blind and say to him, give God the praise. We know this man is a sinner, meaning Jesus. So now they're coming after him. He answered and said, whether he is a sinner or not, I don't know. But one thing I know, where I was blind, now I see. So that's the thing, about Christ and why he did the miracles. Why he did the miracles. He came to the Jews in the first century to gather them unto himself, to gather them unto God. And of course, only a remnant believed, but that was Jesus' goal, is to get as many as possible to turn back to God and away from the evil practices of these Pharisees, the corruptness. So they're saying, that's what I was driving at. Sorry. What the man does is exactly right. The signs that Jesus performed, the miracles, could not be argued against. And that's what he does. Instead of saying he's the Christ, I believe he's the Christ, he is smart about it. He said, he's a smart guy. He says, I don't know if he's the Christ or not, but what I know is I was blind, now I see. And they can't argue with that, right? It's the miracle that he did that shows Christ's power. And so that was the whole point of the miracles. And it says that in other parts of the New Testament, that Christ performed the miracles to confirm his identity, that he was the Son of God, Jesus, the anointed one sent from God in heaven. And so that was why the miracles were done. And in this case, this blind man relies on that, the fact of the miracle. I was blind, now I see. You can't argue against that. You may argue that I believe he's the Messiah or not, but you cannot argue that he healed me, okay? Then they said to him again, verse 26, what did he to thee? How did he open your eyes? He answered, I told you already and you didn't listen. I guess the blind guy, the guy who was healed, is getting mad now. Why would you want me to say it again? Are you wanting to be his disciples? It's so good. He's just tearing them up. I love this blind guy who is healed. He is not stupid, just because he's been blind and a beggar for so long. He hears things. He knows things. He's like, did you not hear me already? Do you want to hear about it again? Does that mean you want to be his disciples? He's just tearing them up. It's so funny. Then they reviled him. They got angry. They're like, oh man, he's tearing us a new one in front of everybody. You are his disciple, but we are Moses' disciples. They just, of course, he didn't say this, but they know. Then they're like, you're his disciple, but we are Moses' disciple. And that's what they said in the last chapter against Christ, remember? When Christ was saying, I was before Abraham. I existed before Abraham. They were like, that's too much. We can't take that. We're going to stone you. They relied on Moses and the Mosaic law. And so that's what they claimed. We are the descendants of Moses. They claim this all the time. They say, we know that God spake to Moses, but as for this fellow, we do not know where he came from. Jesus they're talking about. And this dovetails right in with what we talked about in John chapter 9. The man answered and said to them, why herein is a marvelous thing? So he's like, this is amazing. You don't know where he's from, but yet he opened my eyes. We know that God hears not sinners. But if any man is a worshiper of God and does his will, him he hears. This man is a good man, and he is a follower of God and of Christ at this point now. Since the world began, was it not heard that any man opened the eyes of one that was born blind? So apparently, there may have been records of people opening, restoring sight to someone who had it but then lost it. Of course they have, different medicines and stuff that in certain cases could possibly restore sight from, whatever condition, glaucoma, all these different things. Who knows what they did? They had tons of stuff back then we probably wish we knew about now. But no one had ever restored the sight of a man who was born blind. Okay, there was no record of that anywhere. And so this guy says, if he was not from God, he could do nothing. They answered and said to him, you were altogether born in sin, and now you teach us, and they cast him out. So they said, you're born in sin, and you teach us, and they cast this man out of the temple. Okay, without cause, really. But that was the corruption level that was in the temple at this time in history. It was totally corrupt. In fact, the prophecies of Ezra and Baruch say that God didn't honor, and Malachi and some of the Old Testament, that God didn't honor any of the Second Temple sacrifices. None of them meant anything to the God the Father. He just didn't care about them. It was corrupt. They brought corruption back from Babylon. Okay. All right, so verse 35, Jesus heard that they had cast this man out. When he found him, he said to him, do you believe on the Son of God? Do you believe that I am the Son of God? Is what he's saying. He answered and said, who is he, Lord, that I may believe on him? Jesus said to him, thou hast both seen him, and it is he that talks with you. I'm the one. And he said, Lord, I do believe, and he worshipped him. Okay, the word worshipped here, I just want to, is proskuneo, and that is to do reverence to. And so he bows down to God, to Christ. He says, Lord, I believe, and he worshipped him. Jesus said, for judgment I am come to this world. Whoa. So that's something we're going to talk about. For judgment I am come into this world, that they which see might not see, or they which see not might see, and they which see might be made blind. So this is Christ revealing his mission. Okay, he was there to return to gather the Jews that were gods. Okay, were still gods. 144,000. It's in the book of Revelation. A remnant of Jews is all that was left that really believed in God and followed him. And Jesus says in verse 39, for judgment I am come into this world, that they which see not can see, and those which see might be made blind. He's talking about that sifting of the ones that are true believers, have true faith in God, and the Pharisee types, all the rest, because it was so corrupt. And the ones that think they can see and know everything, right? The Pharisees so prideful in, we are of Moses, we are good, we are blah, and you are bad because you healed someone on the Sabbath, and you're bad because of this and that. And to the blind man, you're bad because you think he is the Messiah. The ones that think they see, Jesus says, will be blinded. And the ones that are blind and don't and are, essentially meek of spirit, those will see. Those will gain sight of who I am. And essentially he's talking about the remnant there, the ones that truly believe on him and in Christ, God, the Father. And so he reveals right there his purpose for judgment. Number one, he was there to gather the Jews that were supposed to be gods and then judge the rest. Okay, and that's what he's talking about. For judgment I am come into this world, this land. And some of the Pharisees, in verse 40, which were with him, heard these words and said, are we blind also? And Jesus said to them, if you were blind, you would have no sin. See that Jesus clarifies what he's talking about. The blind, if you were blind, you would have no sin, but now ye say, we see, therefore your sin remains. Exactly what he was talking about. The ones that thought they could see and knew everything were the ones that still had sin. The ones that held on to their corrupt understandings and hatred for the Son of God. They were the ones who he's talking about that could see, and their sin remains. But the ones who could not see and were looking, the ones that were searching because they didn't know, the ones that were open to faith in the Messiah, Christ himself, the Son of God, those were the ones that would have their eyes opened like the blind man. So in that way, God again is demonstrating to people through his actions. It's a demonstration of what he's doing. He's opening the eyes of those with faith so they can follow after him and be a part of that remnant that's saved of the Jewish nation at this time, which is completely corrupt. Okay. Um, so that is it. John chapter 9. I think we'll just end it there. Thank you again for joining me. I hope this is helpful. I mean, I'm going to study through this stuff, and I figure, you probably want to come along for the ride. So at least this gives us a way to touch base and stay in the Word together. So God bless you. Take care, guys.